Hey guys, what's up? So this is a follow-up video to how to stitch 360 video using basic After Effects plugins. If you haven't seen that video, don't worry about it because you don't have to watch it to understand this video. So there are a few comments in the previous video asking, how do you stitch an up camera? So that's going to be one of the main points of discussion in this video. And since we're doing an up camera, we'll also just go ahead and do a down camera too. In this case, this is actually a down graphic, but basically this technique will allow you to take any sort of input video or input image and project it to the top, the bottom, or the side of a 360 viewing sphere. Additionally, we're going to talk about an improved warping method compared over to the previous video that gives us less crappy results. So if we kind of look at the results here in the example footage, we can see that most everything is pretty much well aligned, except when you zoom in to certain spots, you can find some errors. So like these lines don't meet up exactly. So this technique is mainly for people who are doing 360 video on a budget and people who are new to 360 video and would like an intuitive explanation of how 360 video gets stitched together. If you're looking for pixel level accuracy in 360 video, you should probably buy real stitching software. So this tutorial could possibly take a while, so I'm going to include a bunch of timestamps of different sections and topics in the description below. I'm also going to include a zip file of all the videos that I'm using in this example, so you can follow along too. Likewise, here's another scene showcasing the results of this technique and what we can achieve. So you might be wondering, okay, so what does this actually look like in 360? So I currently have the resolution set to 720 because on my MacBook with the screen capture, any higher resolution is going to make it crap out. So I'm going to include a link in the description with the 4K video so you can take a look at that on your own. Also, the stitching method, we can achieve resolutions beyond this. That's mainly just limited to what your camera rig setup is, and we can talk about that in a second here. But for right now, I'm going to start playing this, and we can kind of take a look at what's going on. So we see the sky is pretty clean, and if we kind of just rotate around, we see that, and nothing looks obviously messed up. So that's pretty cool. Likewise, we can also take a look at the down graphic that I was talking about earlier. There is something about the ceiling here that I have to tell you about. So you might notice that there are some artifacts in the room on the ceiling. So this has less to do with the actual stitching method and more to do with my current camera setup or lack of current camera setup. So I'm using a Xiaoyi Mi for the top camera, and it also is still using the stock lens. So what's essentially happening here is that the field of view of the stock lens is not wide enough to create enough coverage for blending with the horizontal cameras that you see right now. So essentially there are going to be some holes at the top, and these artifacts are just a result of like a random hack that I tried to basically patch up the holes. So you can see here there are some like faded out areas and stuff. So if you have a custom wide angle lens at the top, or you're using a camera that has a wider field of view, like the SJ4000, you're definitely going to get better results than what you see here. So also you may have noticed that the example scenes are relatively still, aside from the fact that you might see a little motion from the trees, from the wind. So this is because I currently only have one camera on me and I'm just rotating it around and then shooting video in every direction. So for people who have 360 cameras that have more camera modules, this stitching technique will support scenes with more intense motion. So another thing that you need to know about this stitching method is that it requires a certain camera setup. So the basic assumption here is that we have a set of horizontal cameras. It doesn't have to be 6 like it's shown here. It could be like 4 or 8 or whatever. But basically, the line of sights of the horizontal cameras are going to all form a plane. Or in other words, they're all going to just point straight to the equator of the viewing sphere. If you do have a top camera, like in the image on the right here, the line of sight of the top camera relative to the horizontal cameras are going to be 90 degrees. And that's going to be the same as well for the bottom camera. If you're interested in a low-cost 3D printable camera mount, I'm going to be linking in the description my GitHub page for this. And basically there are some instructions on what you can do to build this. And basically what you need to do is just download the 3D file and just 3D print it and then put your cameras in. So other popular configurations of cameras that people use are the Freedom 360 mounts or 3D printed versions of these. So this stitching method will work with these cameras as well because the relative angle between all these cameras are 90 degrees. And some people would just call this orthogonal. An example that doesn't work currently is the F360 broadcaster. And this is because if you notice, the line of sight of these horizontal cameras are tilted downward. But hopefully in the future we can include more flexible camera configuration options with this stitching method. So you might be wondering, hardware aside, what do you need in terms of software to be able to stitch 360 video? You're going to need two things. The first thing you're going to need is some sort of video compositing tool. So I'm currently using Adobe After Effects CC, or Creative Cloud. But any software that can perform the following operations that I'm going to talk about should be able to perform this stitching method. So the first thing you want your software to be able to do is you want some sort of way to affect position. Some people also call this translation, but it's basically just clicking and dragging around your video. Another capability that you're going to want is rotation. So rotating around. If you find that you can't perform rotation in your video editing software, you're going to want, as a substitute, flipping across the vertical edge and flipping across the horizontal axis. I meant axis and not edge. Because this is essentially the same as rotating by 180 degrees. So either of those options will work. Another thing we're going to want is the capability to do color correction. So we want to be able to affect brightness, and we also want to be able to affect the color response in terms of our input videos. So this will come in handy when we're blending together videos that are overlapping and stuff. So the last capability that you want is some sort of masking, where you can basically chop off certain parts of the video and then apply like a feathering to the edges. So this will come in handy when we're trying to blend together neighboring videos and stuff. Essentially like the main part of the stitch. So like I said, I'm using After Effects, but any video editing software that can perform the basic operations that I just said should be able to perform the stitching technique. So there is this free software called Blender. I tried doing this technique in Blender, but it was pretty painful. It seems like they're still developing their video editing features, so perhaps in a future release of Blender, doing this technique inside of Blender would be less painful. Along similar lines, there is a free non-commercial version of Nuke. However, your output is limited to 1080 and you can only encode, you can't encode in H.264. I personally never used Nuke, but I've heard good things about it, so that might be something to try as well. So the last piece of software that you're going to need is this thing called 360 Warper, which I've included in the link in the description below. So basically, it's a zip file that contains 5 files. So basically, this is a custom program that I've been working on that will project, which will take any input image or video and project it to the top, the side, or the bottom of a 360 viewing sphere, or locations in your 360 video. So if you're interested in learning more about what is going on in 360 Warper, I'm going to be posting the source code on GitHub. But right now I'm just going to show you how to use it. So basically the only thing you really need to know in order to use it is how to edit the settings.txt file. So also right now 360 Warper only works on Mac and Linux. I might be porting it to Windows when I have some time. So we want to open settings.txt into a text editor. So we can right click on it and by default, text edit is usually the default text editor on Mac, but I'm going to be using Atom, so it's going to look a little different, but we just need to change the text around. So when we open settings.txt, we'll be greeted with a wall of text that we can basically just ignore for right now. And if we scroll down to a part where we see choose settings below and choose settings above, we'll see a bunch of different settings listed here. So basically, these are the things that we want to affect. So we can tell 360 Warper how to properly warp our input video or image for a 360 video that we want. So resolution here is basically the number of pixels wide we want our 360 video to be. And then automatically from that, 360 Warper will basically choose the height to be half of that. So it's going to be 4096 by 2048 if we choose that. Likewise, if we do something like 2048, it's going to choose 2048 as the width and then 1024 for the height. So for an example, let's just suppose that we're going to use 360 Warper to warp this checkerboard image. That doesn't have to be an image, it can also be a video. So here, if we choose up to be 1, warp it through 360 Warper, we're going to get something that looks like this as an output file. And if we view it in a 360 web viewer, basically we'll get something that looks like this, which is the top of our sphere. If we change up to be 0, this is going to project the image onto the side. So instead, we would be getting something that looks like this. And then if we load it into a 360 viewer, we look at it like this, and it's basically on the side of our viewing sphere, kind of like this. So R stands for rotation, and if we change it and use this to warp, we'll basically get something that looks like this instead. And then inside of our 360 viewer, we're going to see like that the checkerboard has been rotated 45 degrees. And then if we choose clip to be 1, we're basically going to get something like this, where it's basically clipped all the like empty black area away from the projection of the image. So in the previous one, we had all this extra black area, and all this extra black area is just the other part of the 360 video or image that we're working with. So clip is just for like efficiency purposes, and you generally want to leave it at 1. And then lastly, we have this setting for debug. If we set this to 1, we're going to get something that looks like what we had before, but it's going to have all these lines on top of it. So these are latitude, longitude lines every 30 degrees. So this is just to help you get an idea of the field of view coverage that your input image is taking up based on the settings that you have. So inside of a 360 viewer, you would see something like this. So this is just to help you get an idea of how much field of view coverage your current projection is taking up. So the next 4 settings here are highly dependent on the camera that you're using. So FOV stands for field of view, and this is actually the effective field of view of the camera that you're using after distortion has been corrected for. So on the Xiaoyi Mi, it's actually less than what it's advertised. It's actually like 97 instead of 155 or whatever they say it is. And basically K1, K2, and K3 are lens distortion correction values. So if instead we set these to be 0, and we try to warp the checkerboard image, we're basically going to still get this projection on the sphere, or the equirectangular projection, but the distortion is still going to be part of the image. So when we look at it in a 360 viewer, we do see that it's projected onto the side or somewhere in our 360 video, but you see that the lines are curved when they're supposed to be straight. So this is just a standard checkerboard with straight lines that I took with the Xiaoyi Mi camera. So the only time you can set K1, K2, and K3 to 0 is if you have software that came with your camera, or there's a setting on your camera that does lens correction for you. If not, you're gonna have to figure these out. So you can basically do this by taking a picture of a checkerboard and then first finding a value of K1 that kind of works, and then changing K2 to like something, and then changing K3 to like something. And usually K2 and K3 will be some negative value. So if you need help with finding the K1, K2, and K3 values for your camera, feel free to post a comment below, or you can send me an email, and either I or someone else who is knowledgeable can help you out with that. I'm also interested in expanding this presets list of a bunch of different action cameras. So if you do manage to find working K1, K2, and K3 values for your camera and it's not listed here, it'd be really appreciated if you could share that in a comment, or do a git pull request to add it to the presets list. And then usually the field of view after lens distortion correction is going to be less than whatever the manufacturer specifies in the product page. This is because you lose some pixels when you correct for lens distortion. So the 360 viewer that I'm using is A-frame, which is a web viewer. So basically to show you like what the projections look like, I've included the A-frame web browser viewer along with 360 Warper in the zip file. So basically you need to take the image you want to visualize, like this top image, and it needs to be in the same folder as index, so in the A-frame folder. And then you just have to rename it to test.jpg. So then you can right click and then open this in like Firefox or Chrome. And then if we look up, we basically see our image, our 360 image realized. So this is basically to help you visualize what you're warping out of 360 Warper before you want to like go ahead and warp an entire video. So let's try warping a video. So the folder that says outside contains all of the video that's straight off the camera. And then outside warped is what it should look like after it's warped properly. So I've included those as well if you just want to check to make sure you get the same thing that I did. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this footage, and then we're going to go back and place it into 360 Warper. So I'm going to paste here. So we just make sure that our settings are what we want, and we want to basically warp one of the up cameras. So if we look here, we have top 01, and this is an up camera. So what we need to do, we're going to be using a terminal. So basically open a terminal in Mac. If you've never used a terminal before, don't be intimidated. It only seems intimidating because of like Hollywood movies and stuff. So the reason why we want to use a terminal is because when we're sitting in a coffee shop, we can like type crazy things and like pretend like we're hackers, and people will think we're like really hipster hackers and stuff. Just kidding. We actually need to pass in some command line arguments to the warping program to let it know which files to warp. But don't worry, it's really not that difficult. So one of the commands you can use is pwd, which stands for print working directory. And if you press enter, this will basically tell you where the terminal currently is in your computer. So right now it's in my user folder. So my project folder is in Sandbox and YouTube. So if we type cd, that stands for change directory. And my YouTube project folder is actually inside of another folder called Sandbox. So if we press enter, cd, which means change directory, into Sandbox YouTube, this basically gets us to this same window here. And if we type ls for list, you see that there's a folder called 360 Warper, one called A-frame, and footage, which is exactly what we see here. So what we want to do actually is we want to go into our 360 Warper folder. So cd 360 Warper, and then you press enter. And then if we press list, and we go over here and we look at this, we basically see the exact same files. So 360 Warper FFmpeg, settings and readme, and then all of the MP4 footage. So basically the terminal is just a different way of seeing your computer. It just shows up as text instead. So we're basically in the same part of the computer, one way through the terminal and one way through Finder. So basically what we want to do is once we've confirmed that our settings are correct, what we want to do is we want to type / and then warp.py. So this is basically going to run this Python script over here. And then we also need to tell it which video file we want to basically warp. So we want to warp this top 01 here. So what we're going to do is we're going to type top 01.mp4. So that's basically going to tell our warping program to warp top 01 mp4. And then once we're ready, we're going to press enter. And then a bunch of stuff is going to happen. So if you're interested in knowing what's actually happening here, there's going to be source code is going to be posted on GitHub, or we can start a discussion here or something. So basically there's some specs that it's going to print out, like the input resolution that it detects of your input video, the size that it's going to end up being, and then it's going to tell you the target 360 video resolution that it's going for, which is 4096 by 2048 as we specified over in the settings file. And then here we have 97.3, which is the same as our field of view. And then you don't have to worry about focal length. That's automatically calculated. And then here it says our projection target is the top in the North Pole. So that's exactly what we want. And then it's just regurgitating all these other settings. We're also clipping because we have set to be 1. And then it's going to take a while to run, but yeah. So it's automatically going to also create a temp folder, but don't worry about that. Just leave it alone. It's going to delete itself when it's done. And then at any point in time, if you want to quit, you can just press Control-C. So once it's done warping, it'll say something like done warping top 01 mp4. And then if we scroll down, we now have a new file in our Finder that says top 01 warped. So basically this is top 01 mp4 just warped to fit the description of our 360 output that we want. So if we preview this, we see that the same lamppost in the first video, the original video, is shown here now. And the sun is kind of like distorted, but this is exactly what we want. Okay, so now let's try warping our side cameras. So for side cameras, we're not going to be projecting up. We're actually going to be projecting to the side. So we can set that to 0. And if you notice that the side cameras, they're all rotated sideways. So we want to rotate this 90 degrees clockwise, basically, in the direction of the clock hand. So, but this rotation here is specified for counterclockwise. So what we want to set this to is -90. Now we're going to go back into terminal. We can type pwd to make sure that we're in our correct directory, which is 360 warper. And we just execute warp.py. And this time, we basically can just pass it all of the horizontal cameras because they all have the same setting. So we can tell it all of the side cameras. So we can type side 01. And then if we press tab, it'll just auto-complete if the file name is not like similar to any other ones. And we can type side 02, we can type side 03, side 04, side 05, side 06, side 07, and then side 08. So we have 8 horizontal cameras here. And then what we can do is if we just press enter and we walk away for like, I don't know, some time, it'll basically automatically produce the warped versions of all 8 of those. So this might take a few minutes, so just like get a coffee or something. Okay, so basically once the warping has finished, you're going to see something that says done warping side 1, 2, 3, up to 8. So, and then if we go into our Finder, we're going to see a bunch of new entries in our Finder. So we have all these new files that have warped by their name. So if we preview these are basically our side cameras, basically warped, as you can see there are some curved edges in the corners. So there's one camera, another one, another one, another one. So what we're gonna do is we'll do some organization real quick. Here we're gonna make a new video called tutorial outside warped. And if you wanna check your results here compared to the ones that I got, you should get something similar to the ones in the outside warped that I've included in the zip file. So let's move everything into tutorial outside warped. So I'm going to take these and I'm just going to click and drag them in here. So you might notice that in the outside warped folder there are two top cameras. This is basically like what I said earlier, because since my camera doesn't have large enough field of view, I actually just took video pointed up in one direction, and then if you notice the sun here, right, it's right here, then I rotated the camera 90 degrees. So just to provide a little more coverage. So when you actually project these two to the top, you actually get like a cross pattern or like a plus sign. Once we have our footage inside of tutorial outside warped, we're basically ready to start stitching our video together. So I'm going to be using After Effects, but any software that, like I said earlier, should be able to work. So inside my main project folder, I'm going to just create a folder for After Effects. And basically once we have After Effects open, I'm going to go to File and just save this project into the After Effects folder here. I'm just going to call this tutorial. Cool. So earlier, if you remember, we set our resolution for our 360 video to the warper to be 4096, and the warper will automatically select a vertical height of 2048. So inside of After Effects, to basically match the warper, we're going to go to Composition at the top, select New Composition, and then we're going to select the width to be 4096, and then the height to be 2048. And I'm just going to name the composition main. The footage that I provided, the Xiaomi cameras, they're shot at 5994 frame rate. So we'll set that. And then these other settings seem okay. So we're going to press OK. And if we scroll back on the mouse wheel, we basically can change the zoom. And we just see a blank composition. So what we can do is we can go to File and import a file or multiple files to bring in the warped footage we had. Or what we can do is we can just go into the Finder and then go into Tutorial Outside Warped, and then just click and drag to highlight all of these, and then just drag it over to the project pane here. If you can't see the project pane, it might be selected onto Effect and Controls at the top left. So be sure to select Project Pane to drop in files. So once we've got our files in, we basically can start stitching. We're going to start with the top camera first. So for people who know After Effects, what I'm about to do is a little weird. So I'm going to actually make a new comp from selection, but it'll be apparent as to why I'm doing this later in the video. So it's going to open top 01 warped inside of a new composition. And it's just going to look like this. Down here in all the composition lists, there are different tabs. We're just going to close the top 01 warped one. And we're mostly going to just be working in main the whole time. So be sure to select the top 01 composition here. It says composition, and not the actual footage itself, which says MPEG. So we're going to select the composition and we're going to bring this in. And since this is our top camera, we're going to just snap it to the top of the composition. And when we let go, we see something like this. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the side 01 camera, or basically any other side camera that has a matching feature to the top camera. So here we see the top of this lamppost, and actually in our side 01 camera, we also have the same top lamppost here. So now what I'm going to do is for every video, I'm going to select new comp from selection, which is going to open up a new comp, but we can close out of it. So here in the tab, we press X. And then making sure that I select the composition version instead of the MPEG version. I'm going to click and drag this and put this into the composition. So if we just move this around, we can kind of see that this should kind of go here because the lamppost is matching. And then if I select transfer mode, which is in the bottom left in the timeline, under mode, it says normal. We can select this to be screen. And we can kind of see through each other. And then we notice that we can kind of line this up so that the lamppost is matching. If you don't see transfer mode, there's probably the toggle switch. So if you look down, there's a toggle switches transfer modes thing. So just select that until you can see this. So what we're actually gonna do is we're not gonna line it up to this lamppost here, because earlier I mentioned that our assumption is that the cameras that we're using are projecting directly out to the equator of the viewing sphere. So if you select side 01 warped and then you press P, you'll see that options for position will drop down. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to see the second value here, and we're going to type in 1024. So 1024 is half the vertical height of our 360 video that we're going to output. We're choosing to put our videos in the center vertical because that's where the equator of the viewing sphere is. So this is going to cause us to like mess up this feature here, but we'll fix that later. And so basically what we want to do is we just want to click and drag this and match the horizontal alignment only. And then once we set that, we can go to screen and then change that back to normal. So now we're going to move on to our second camera called side 02 warped. I'm going to do the same thing, right click and select new comp from selection. And then I'm going to close out the new comp that I created. And then I'm just going to click and drag that comp into the main comp. So we get something like this. So starting with the second video, what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the top left here. And then you see this rectangle. We're going to click that. And then basically we're going to draw a mask to basically kind of cover the whole second camera. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go back and select the selection tool again. And then we're going to select the mask to kind of just chop in to our second video. If we go down to the bottom left and select the mask and then press F, there's going to be a drop down for mask feather. So we're going to set that to something like 100, which is a good setting at this resolution. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring the mask out, and we just want to bring it in just enough so that we don't see this hard edge anymore. So something like that. So basically the hard edge on the right is completely faded. What we're going to do next is we're going to select our transfer mode for our side 2 warped, select that to screen, and then we're going to try to align this to the first video. So we're going to zoom in, and we're basically going to try to align this to the first video. Some people call this a correlation. So we're going to get something that looks like that. And then if you zoom in a lot, you can use the up, down, and side arrow keys to do single pixel movements. So kind of just look for it so like everything looks as sharp as possible. So if you notice that it's like kind of sharp in some areas and then a little blurry in others, try to match the features that are in the center equator. And then we can fix the other ones later. So once we're done here, we can just select normal. And if we zoom out, we get something that kind of looks like this. Okay, so we're just basically going to keep doing this to the remaining videos. Right click on side 03, new comp from selection, close out of the comp. We're going to bring in our side 03. We can select side 02 and then press M, which will expose the mask. And what we can do is select the mask and then press Control C or Apple C to copy the mask. Then select side 03 and then do Apple V or Control V to basically copy over the mask. And then what we're going to do is we're going to try to align this to the second video. And we are going to go to screen. And basically we're just gonna match the features like we did previously. And here, there's a resolution setting. If you need to be able to see better, you can just select full. And then this will basically bring this in. And then we can zoom in with the mouse wheel. And then we can do single pixel movements, kind of look like that. And then we can select screen and push it back to normal. So you notice that there might be some errors here, but we'll try to get it as good as you can. So eventually we're going to run into an issue where one of the videos is slightly not exposed correctly, like the other videos. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the video that's problematic, and we're going to go to the menu bar and select Effect, go down to Color Correction, and then we're going to click on Curves. So once we have curves up, we're first going to try to match just general brightness. I usually start low and then just ramp it up until it looks like it matches. So maybe something like that. And I don't know if you can see on the screen, but it looks like it's slightly more red. So what we're going to do is we're going to select Channel and then pick Red. So now we can control the red values of this video only. And I'm just gonna pull down on it and attenuate it a little bit. So we zoom back out, it looks like things are better matching. So yeah, we're basically going to just continue doing this for the remaining video tracks until we hit the end here. So you may have noticed as well, so if we select all the side cameras, we just click and then shift click the bottom, and then we press P. If you look at the vertical displacements or the vertical position of each of these videos, you notice that as we're getting farther away from side 01, we're actually drifting away from the equator, because 1024 is the equator. Here it's 1023, here's 1018, and here's 1017. So that's just gonna happen due to noise and like imperfections in like camera sensors and like the 3D printed mounts that we're using and stuff. So as long as this drift isn't like an insane amount, we should probably be okay. So right now we've not even drifted like 10 pixels off, and the whole vertical is like 1024. So that's like not much of that. Eventually this will be a problem once we try to do the wraparound, but that's not a problem we can't solve. So we'll talk about that when we get there. So eventually we're gonna get to a point where we're nearing the end of the video. So we've started from the right side and we've been kind of stitching across to the left. So I just finished stitching side 07 warped, and we basically have one horizontal camera left to do. So this is gonna be an edge case, quite literally. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start by making a new comp from selection, similar to the other ones. Then we're gonna close out of it. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring in this comp, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take, we're gonna select side 07, right? Press M to expose its mask. Select the mask, Apple C or Control C. Then we're gonna select side 08 warped, Control V or Apple V, and basically apply the mask. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna first align it just like we did with the other ones. So let's see here. I'm gonna turn this onto screen, and we're just gonna match this. So it looks something like this, I believe, and set this back to normal. Okay, so once we have that, what we're gonna do is we're going to select side 08, and we're gonna duplicate the layer. So I believe on Mac it's Apple D or Control D on Windows or something. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the second layer, I'm gonna press enter, and I'm just gonna call this copy, just so we know the difference between the original and the copy. And then I'm gonna select the copy, press M to expose its mask, select the mask, and then delete it. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna turn off the original side 08 warped, so turn it off. Then if I uncheck the eye, you'll see that it disappears. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to select the copy, and then I'm going to select the mask tool on the top left, and then I'm going to basically mask in from the left side. And then I'm going to select the select tool, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this mask all the way over until we can't see any pixels left. So something like this. Cool. So what we can do now is we can turn back on side 08 warped, the original copy, by checking the eyeball, and you'll see that we're getting the stitch back. So then what we want to do with copy is we're going to press P to get the position information, and then we're only going to move the X slider, or the horizontal slider, across the entire composition. And also, if you press space and hold down space, it'll actually help you drag the entire composition around. So we're going to move the X basically over to the right here, and then eventually we're going to zoom in a little bit, hold space and click to drag. And we're just going to zoom in with the mouse wheel, and we're basically going to move this until it hits the edge. So earlier I mentioned, like, if we basically select the top layer and then shift click all the other layers and press P, we'll see that we started at 1024, and then as we stitched, the vertical position started to drift. So yeah, by the end of this, we're off by like 18 pixels. And so right now, this side 08 copy is going to like align perfectly with the other side, which is the original side 8. So the problem here becomes, if we select screen here, we can try clicking and dragging this copy, and we can actually get it to stitch good with the original image. But if we move it, it's going to be unstitched from the other side over here. So we're kind of in a pickle right now. So we're going to leave side 8 stitched with its own copy. And what we're going to do is we're going to just use some masking to basically resolve this. So basically, I'm going to set this back to normal. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with a basic mask on the left side of our copy. And so now we have 2 masks. So what I'm going to do with the second mask is, you see there's a mode here and it says add. So what we're going to do is we're going to click that, and then there's a drop down, and we'll click subtract. And you notice that it just like cut away part of the image. So we're going to start off by feathering the new mask that's doing the cutting to something like 100, which is what we've been using. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically pull back on this, because you notice that it's feathering away so much that you can see the underneath layer. So we're going to pull back on this until we can't see any hard edges anymore. However, you still notice that we have these errors going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply another mask, and this mask we can kind of focus it in smaller, so it's not as high, around the same area. And again, we're going to select subtract here, so it's cutting away. And what we're going to do is, next to the mask, you're going to see this pen tip tool. We're going to select that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to draw in like 3 or 4 points on the edge of this mask. So I wonder if I can select the color. I want to select red, so hopefully that'll be easier to see. So here's our new mask. And if we press F, we're going to set this to a less aggressive feathering, so maybe like 50. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to start masking off the areas that are problematic. So we kind of draw around the areas that we're not happy with. And if you need an additional point, you can go ahead and click the pen tool and just click on it. So if I just like kind of push this down, we can achieve something that looks kind of like this. So it's not going to be perfect, but if we kind of zoom out a little bit, it looks a little better. However, we're still gonna see like a discontinuous edge here, and that's gonna be really problematic. And you can kind of see this building like faded up here, but that's not as bad. We can kind of push in a little bit, but it's probably the best we can do with that. So in order to resolve this final issue here, what we're gonna do is we're going to select the side 08 warped copy here. And then we're going to go to Effect, and then we're going to go to Distort, and then we're going to go to Mesh Warp. So basically this gives us a grid of points to do some distortion stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the number of rows to say like 9, or like maybe 12. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull down just slightly. I'm just going to pull down just slightly here. And then here we're also going to pull down just slightly. And then now we're going to flip to basically side 01, which is the one on the left here. And what we're going to do is we're also going to apply a mesh warp. We'll give it something like 9 rows, more rows, to have additional control. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically affect the points that are around it and push this up a little bit. And push this up a little bit. And then maybe like push this up a little bit, and then push this up a little bit. So you can see that we're getting this discontinuous edge to look more connected. So basically we want to just use very tiny warping movements to do this, to make it not super obvious that we did this. So we can add additional rows if we need more control. So what we can do is we can do something like this. And then we kind of just zoom out a little bit, and you can kind of not really tell what's going on. And if you do this correctly, it won't look super terrible. So yeah. So now basically we have everything looking pretty connected. There are probably going to be a few errors, as you've noticed. And then this wraparound should be properly aligned. So I think we're good. So now we're going to start doing the up camera. So what we're going to do is we use the up camera for reference earlier. We're actually going to take the top 01 layer and click and slide it to the top above these other layers, the side layers. So first things first, you might notice that the color correction on the top layer is off. So we're going to start by going to Effect, doing a simple color correction. And we are going to get this to match the blue sky and the other ones. So there seems to be a little too much red going on, so I'm going to pull back on that. And then we're going to select the green channel and pull back on that too. And then we're going to select the blue channel and we're going to bump that up a little bit. And it looks like we have too much red still. I'm going to kind of slide back on that. Okay, and I think this is pretty well matched. Maybe still a little too much blue. So I'm going to choose blue. And maybe just pull back slightly on that. So we get something that kind of looks like this to color correct first. Probably still a little too much blue. Yeah, so that looks a lot better. So yeah, you're going to have to kind of mess around with that. It's kind of an art. Okay, so now we need to start blending the top camera onto these other side cameras. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the mask tool, and if you actually click and hold, you'll see that there are these other shapes. So we're going to approximate the edges of the sky camera with the ellipse tool. So we're going to select that and then let go. And what we're going to do is we're going to select the top camera, and then what we're going to do is we're going to just start drawing a circle over the mask. So you'll see something like that. So right now the mask is set to add. What we're going to do is flip it to subtract. And then if we press F, we're going to feather this by like 100. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to like tune this curve to basically push up against and cut away on the sky mask until there are no hard edges on the sky mask. It's fine if we see the hard edges on the side cameras. So you could alternatively do this by drawing a mask on the side cameras to blend into the sky. But this is just easier, I think, because there's less masks that we have to draw. I haven't tried doing that, but maybe there are better results that way. So we get something like that, and then we're going to draw another mask here. We're going to press F, set that to like 100, and then we're going to click subtract. And then we're going to select the select tool, and then we're just going to push up into the mask until it fades away. Like that. Move over here, select the mask, add a feathering to it, so by pressing F. And then we're going to go to the mask mode and pressing subtract. Select the select tool, do something like this. Pushing up until that edge is gone. So if you kind of look, we're getting like a faded edge going on over here. So here we're going to basically we're going to draw a circle first, and then I'm going to select it and delete it. And then we're going to make sure that top warp is selected, and then we're going to start drawing our mask again. And then same thing, select this to subtract, press F a few times to set the feathering rate. And then we're going to just like push this up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select another mask for this last edge here, kind of. Okay, so we're gonna basically get something that looks like this. So basically, if you have a top camera that has enough coverage, this process of setting the edge masks for the sky camera, you're basically gonna be done here if you have enough coverage with from your top camera. Since we don't, we're gonna basically go into how to like fill these holes a little better. So if you remember, I said earlier that we also have a second top camera. We're gonna make a new comp from the selection, close out the comp, and then we're gonna take this second camera and then just also like attach it to the top. And you see we get something like this. The color is messed up, but we can click top 01 and then click the effect controls. Copy the curves by selecting it and then pressing Apple C or Control C, clicking top 02, making sure the effect controls pane is exposed, and then we're just going to Control V into it, and then we've essentially matched the color. So what we're going to do is we're just going to apply the same ellipse masks to basically blend out the edges of that. Okay, so I've basically finished masking the second sky in, and you notice that we're getting a little more coverage, but we still have some holes here, and we have these hard edges from the side camera. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna use some solid colors to basically patch up these holes. So we're gonna start by selecting layer at the menu, and then clicking new, and then we're gonna go down to solid. And basically we're going to click the eyedropper here, and we're just going to select something that is very similar to the sky, and then click OK. So you see that the whole composition is now blue. What we're going to do is we're going to just take this and put it under our sky. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start masking with the rectangle mask from the top, just kind of like down here to this much. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a feathering to this and probably pick something really large, like 200. And basically we're just going to start pulling down on this until we kind of don't see these hard edges anymore. So something that looks kind of like that. And you might notice that one of our features is getting screwed. What we can do is hold on to the mask tool and select ellipse. Draw a mask around the lamppost, and then we're gonna basically click subtract instead. And then we're gonna make this feather like pretty small, something like probably 12 pixels. And basically we're gonna contain this around the lamppost. Something like this. Something like that. So some of it's like kind of covered, but so you might notice that some of the stuff in the middle doesn't look quite right. What we're going to do is we're going to make a new solid, and instead this time we're going to click a color near the center that's a little brighter. Select that and click OK. And then we're going to click the ellipse mask and basically kind of draw like a circle here. Okay, so you notice that it's kind of blocking out the sun. So if you hide the new solid, the brighter solid, basically what we're going to do in the center here to unblock the sun is we're going to select a few points here, and we're going to pull this up. To kind of unmask the sun a little bit. And then we're going to basically bring in our solid here. I'm going to select lighten. And you see that the color isn't quite matching. So what we can do is we can select layer and go to solid settings. Click this eyedropper and then choose a matching color for the sun basically. So something like that. And you can probably like pull back a little bit on these sides here to match the original kind of flare and color of the sky. Maybe something like that. So that is kind of our sky. You can kind of play with it a little more. So it was a little tedious because we don't have wide enough field of view for the top camera. So this also may or may not work for more motion intensive scenes. So you really should make sure the top camera has enough field of view so you don't have to do any hole patching. Okay, and then we're gonna finish off with doing the bottom graphic. So we're back in 360 Warper, and I've added this ground cover graphic that we're gonna use to project to the ground. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into a terminal, and I'm going to basically go to this folder, 360 Warper. And also, I forgot to mention, another useful terminal command is CDing back up. So we're currently in 360 Warper, but if we want to go back to YouTube, we can type CD and then 2 dots. And then if we type PWD, we're 1 folder up now. So that's also useful. So I'm going to go back to 360 Warper. So if we look at our settings here, basically we want the same resolution. We're going to choose up for the down camera. It'll make sense in a little bit here. And then we can choose an arbitrary field of view since it's not a real camera lens. So we can choose something like 120. And then we're gonna want to set all of these distortion parameters to 0 because there's no distortion in the graphic that we have. So once we've confirmed those settings, we're gonna type warp./warp.py and then the name of the graphic, which is ground cover PNG. So we're gonna press enter, and that's gonna run. And then now in the same folder, we notice that there's a ground cover warped JPEG. So it kind of looks like this. So right now it's projected to the top, but it's not gonna be hard to get it to the bottom. So, Okay, so we're back in After Effects now, and I've imported the ground cover warped JPEG. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring it in and snap it to the bottom. So you notice that it looks kind of goofy because it's actually projected to the top. But we can basically fix this by rotating it 180 degrees. So what we can do is we can select the layer, and then if we press R, we can click the value and then just type 180. And now it's going to be on the bottom. If we don't have rotation, we can also just press S for scale. And then we can just type -100. And it will flip across the vertical and horizontal edge here. So this is kind of really big. So what we want to do is we take a rectangle mask and just kind of section off the part that we don't want. Here we just want to cover these hard edges of the side cameras. So what we can do is we select that and then choose the mask and flip it to subtract. So we have something like this. So when we look on the down camera now, we'll actually see this text like we did earlier. Yeah, so basically that is pretty much the whole technique. Again, if you have a proper top camera with a wide enough field of view, you don't have to do this random hole patching stuff, which is super hacky. So earlier at the beginning, we were making our videos with new comps from selections. And basically, so the reason why we want to do this is because we can switch scenes now really fast. So if you think about it, if you have a 360 camera rig, unless you just like throw your camera off a mountain, just like what the Spartans did with babies that they thought were inferior, your camera is not really going to like change position much. And the sensors and the cameras relative to one another are going to be pretty fixed. So throughout this whole time, we've also been creating a template or an interface for different videos. So what we're going to do now is we're going to rapidly switch to another scene. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to select File. I'm going to make a copy, Save As. And I'm just going to call this Tutorial 2. So basically what we're going to do now is we're going to click on all the MP4s. If you just hold Apple and then click, you can multi-click. And then I'm going to press Delete. And it's going to ask us if we want to delete these 10 selected project items and stuff. So I'm going to click Yeah. So all that we have left are these solids. And if you actually click on these compositions, we still have the masks in place. So basically all we have to do is just start loading in our videos, right? So we can get rid of the solids because it's not going to be the same for the scene. And then we're just going to leave the ground here. So I just imported a different scene, right? This second scene that I was showing you. So so here's the first camera from that scene. So what we do is we double click side 01 warped. And basically we take the new side 01 warped from the new scene and we just drag and drop it in. And then we click side 02 warped, click and drag the side 02 MP4 in. And if we go back to main, you see that we already have like our stuff stitched together. So I click side 03 and click and drag in here. Basically have things automatically stitched for us, aside from like color correction stuff that you see here, but we have to do that anyway. So side 04, right? So we basically have everything just being auto-stitched for us. So we've essentially made this a template. That's why at the beginning we were right-clicking and making new comps from selections. So we don't have to go through the process of redrawing masks every time we import a new scene, right? So I'm gonna leave this scene up to you to figure out. The ceiling can get kind of tricky. So if you have any questions about anything, feel free to comment or send an email or something. And again, the camera calibration stuff with the lens distortion parameters, K1, K2, and K3, those can be kind of tricky. So if you need some help, feel free to comment in the section below. So either I can help you out, or someone else who's knowledgeable can help you out too. And if you do find camera correction parameters for like different cameras that aren't listed in the presets, It'd be much appreciated if you shared a comment on what values you got. Anyways, guys, I know it was super long, but hopefully if you didn't know much about 360 video before, this hopefully sheds some light on what it's about and how you can stitch stuff together. And if you were looking for a low-cost method of stitching, hopefully this is hopefully this was helpful as well. So thanks, guys.